All right, server security. It's a big topic, right? But we're going to deep dive into it today, especially how privilege control fits into the picture. We've got some fantastic material to work with, including some insights from Bert Blevins, this tech entrepreneur and educator. He really breaks down some complex stuff.
You know, what's fascinating to me is how many people just think, oh, server security, that's firewalls and passwords.
Yeah.
But Blevins, he really pushes back on that. He shows how privilege control, it's really like the foundation, is the bedrock of a solid security setup, you know?
Okay, so let's get to the heart of it. What exactly is privilege control? Imagine you're explaining this to someone who's maybe heard the term, but they don't really get the nuts and bolts.
How to explain it simply? Okay, so think about it like this. You wouldn't give every single employee in your company a master key that opens every single room, every filing cabinet, right?
Right.
Privilege control, it's basically the digital version of that. It's all about defining who gets to access what on your server. And crucially, it's also about what they're allowed to do with that access once they're in.
So it's not just about keeping the bad guys OUT, it's about what authorized users can or can't do once they're inside the system, right?
Absolutely. Minimizing that risk, even from, well-meaning users who might accidentally cause harm if they have too much power, Blevins talks about this technique, just-in-time permissions, which I find really interesting.
Just-in-time permissions, that sounds like a smart way to do things. Tell me a little more about that.
Okay, so picture this. You grant access only when it's absolutely necessary and only for the specific task they need to do. Almost like giving someone a temporary P card. Once the job's done, poof, access is gone.
Oh, I see. So you're really limiting the window for anything bad to happen, whether it's an accident or someone intentionally trying to do something they shouldn't.
Yeah, exactly. It's really smart.
All right, so we're starting to see how it all fits together. But let's step back for a moment and talk about the WHY. Why is privilege control so important? What are the stakes if we don't get this right?
The stakes, they're really high. We're not just talking about losing some data here. Blevins, he lays out these potential consequences of a security breach. And I gotta say, it's pretty scary stuff.
Yeah, like what kind of consequences are we talking about here? I think that's where it really hits home for our listeners.
Imagine the costs to recover from a data breach, right? Remediation, legal fees, fines, lost revenue. It adds up so quickly.
Oh, yeah.
And then there's the whole reputation thing.
Yeah.
The damage to your reputation, the loss of customer trust.
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing that can take years to rebuild.
That's the kind of thing that keeps CEOs up at night.
Yeah, exactly.
And we're not just talking about some hypothetical risk here. These threats, they're real, they're happening all the time. What are some of the most common ways that servers are targeted?
Okay, so malware, it's still a big problem. Viruses, worms, ransomware, all those nasty things. They're designed to get into your system, cause havoc, stealing data, messing up files, even locking up your whole system until you pay a ransom.
It feels like these attacks are just getting more and more sophisticated too, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. And then there's unauthorized access, which is always a threat. It could be hackers trying to brute force their way in, maybe finding and exploiting some vulnerability in your software, or even using stolen credentials to just walk right in the front door. A good password, it's not always enough these days.
So even if you have a strong password, you're not necessarily safe.
No, you're not. You're really not.
What else? What else is out there?
Denial of service attacks. We're seeing more and more of those. Basically, attackers, they flood your server with so much traffic that legitimate users can't even get in.
So it's like a digital traffic jam, bringing everything to a standstill.
Exactly. And then there's the insider threat. That's where privilege control, it becomes even more vital.
Insider threat, you mean like a disgruntled employee?
What?
Or maybe just someone accidentally leaking sensitive information.
Exactly. It's not always some outside attacker. Sometimes the biggest risks, they come from within the organization itself. And then you have things like SQL injection, where hackers exploit weaknesses in your web applications. And then there's phishing attacks, which, they prey on human error, trying to trick people into giving up sensitive information.
So it's a real battle out there. And if one of these attacks, if it gets through, the consequences can be pretty rough, as we were talking about earlier.
Oh, absolutely. Blevins, he really makes this point. Understanding these threats, that's the first step to putting effective privilege control measures in place. It's not about just setting it and forgetting it. It's about proactively managing risk, being vigilant all the time. Welcome back.
So we've really dug into the WHY of privilege control, why it's so essential in this crazy world of digital threats. But now I want to get into the HIW. How do we actually do this? How do we put all of this into practice? Because it can all feel a bit overwhelming, to be honest.
Yeah, I think a lot of people get kind of stuck on how complex it seems, but Blevins, he really advocates for this really basic principle, least privilege.
Least privilege. Okay, I'm curious. Tell me more.
So at its heart, it's about only giving users and even processes only the bare minimum access they actually need to do their work. No more, no less. If they don't need access to a certain server, a folder, even a specific function, they shouldn't have it.
So it's like a need-to-know basis for the digital world. I can see how that would really limit the damage if something does go wrong.
Exactly. It minimizes that attack surface. One way to put this into action that Blevins really dives into is role-based access control, or RBAC.
RBAC. Yeah, I've heard that term thrown around, but I'll be honest, I'm not totally clear on the details. It sounds kind of like something out of corporate training video,
Yeah. But if you strip away all that jargon, it's actually pretty cool.
Huh.
Imagine you're grouping users based on their roles in the company, like marketing, sales, engineering, whatever. Each of those roles, they get a specific set of permissions that are tailored to what they need.
So instead of granting permissions one by one for each person, you're creating these permission bundles that line up with their job.
Exactly. Makes it so much easier to manage permissions, especially as your organization grows. Someone new joins the marketing team, boom, you assign them the marketing role and their access is automatically set.
And then if they switch departments, you just change their role and you don't have to manually adjust all those permissions. That's smart.
Yeah, it really is. And it's not just about being efficient. Blevins points out how RBAC, it actually makes your security stronger across the board. It helps prevent unauthorized access, it minimizes those insider threats, and it even makes audits easier.
All right, RBAC is officially on my radar now. But even with a system like that in place, things change, right? New vulnerabilities are always popping up. How do you make sure that your privilege control, that it stays effective over time?
Blevins is a huge EE fan of regular security audits. Think of it like taking your server in for a checkup, just like you do with your car.
So even if everything seems to be running fine, it's about looking for potential problems before they become actual problems.
Yeah, exactly. An audit, it helps you find those things you might miss otherwise, like, maybe some users have accumulated more permissions than they need, or there are inactive accounts that should be closed, or maybe even gaps in your policies, your access policies.
That sounds like it could be a lot of work, especially for bigger companies.
Yeah, can be. But Blevins, he highlights how automated tools are really changing things here. There are solutions now that can scan your systems for vulnerabilities, flag those users who have too much access, and they even generate these reports to help you keep track of things.
So it's about using technology to make these audits more efficient and hopefully more effective too, right?
Right, but technology is only part of the puzzle. Blevins emphasizes involving multiple stakeholders in the audit process, not just the IT folks.
So it's not just an IT issue. Who else should be part of this?
Ideally, you'd have a team from different parts of the organization: IT, security, legal, compliance, maybe even people from the different business units. This makes sure that your privilege control system actually aligns with the needs and the goals of the entire organization.
So it's about bringing together different perspectives to get a more holistic view of your security posture.
Yeah, absolutely. And to make these audits really count, Blevins has some great advice. One thing that stuck with me is to start with a clear scope. Don't try to do everything at once.
So decide up front what you're actually auditing, whether it's a specific system, a certain type of data, or the entire organization. Makes sense.
Yeah. And he also says it's important to establish a baseline. You need to understand where you are and now what vulnerabilities you already have before you can figure out where you need to go.
So it's like taking a snapshot of your security before you start making changes.
Exactly. And he also talks about using a variety of methods to gather information, reviewing logs, talking to users, even conducting penetration tests.
Penetration tests. That's where you have ethical hackers try to break into your system, right? Sounds a little scary.
It can be, yeah. But it's super valuable. It helps you uncover vulnerabilities that you might not find any other way.
Okay, so you've done the audit and you've found some weak spots. Now what?
This is where a good remediation plan comes in. Blevins really stresses documenting everything you find and outlining very specific steps to address each vulnerability. And this should be a living document that changes as your needs change.
So it's not just about finding the problems, it's about having a clear plan to fix them.
Exactly. And then, maybe even more importantly, you need a process for ongoing monitoring and review. Security, It's not a one-time thing.
It's a marathon, not a sprint.
That's it. Blevins recommends using tools to monitor your systems for suspicious activity, regularly reviewing access logs, and doing periodic security assessments to make sure everything is still locked down.
It's about staying vigilant, adapting to new threats as they come up. There's a lot to think about.
There is. But Blevins, he has so many great resources out there, articles, videos, even tutorials. He's like a walking server security encyclopedia.
Yeah, we'll definitely point our listener to those. But before we get ahead of ourselves, we still have more to cover in this deep dive. Okay, so we spent the last 2 parts of this deep dive really digging into privilege control, like the basics, the best practices, all that good stuff. But I kind of want to shift gears a bit now. What about the future? What's coming next?
It's a good question. And it's one that Blevins, he tackles head on. He's great at seeing not just where things are, but where they're going. And one of the biggest things he talks about is, well, cloud computing.
The cloud, yeah. Feels like everything's moving there, but how does that change things when it comes to privilege control?
It changes a lot, actually. I mean, cloud computing, it brings a whole new set of opportunities and challenges. On the one hand, you've got amazing scalability, flexibility, you can save money, but you're also basically handing your data over to someone else.
So it gets even harder to control.
It can, yeah. Blevins talks about this thing called the shared responsibility model of security in the cloud. The provider, they're responsible for the basic infrastructure, the physical service, the networks. But you, the customer, you're still in charge of securing your own data, your applications within that environment.
So privilege control is still super important, even in the cloud.
Absolutely. You got to be careful about who has access to your stuff, what kind of access they have. And this often means you need like a cloud-specific privilege control solution, something designed for the cloud,
Makes sense. So what else is on the horizon? Anything else Blevins is keeping an eye on?
He's really into automation. And this is where things get exciting, I think. Imagine security tasks happening automatically, less human error, even responding to threats in real time.
That sounds pretty futuristic. How would that even work?
Well, think AI, artificial intelligence, machine learning, all that. These technologies, they can analyze tons of data, spot patterns that we might miss, and even start to predict and prevent those threats.
So it's like having a security guard who can see into the future, stop the bad guys before they do anything.
Kinda, yeah. Blevins believes AI and machine learning are getting game changers when it comes to security, helping us stay one step ahead.
Sounds almost too good to be true. Are there any downsides?
Blevins is careful to say that we can't just rely on technology alone. The human element, it's still super important.
So we're not just talking about firewalls and algorithms, we're talking about people too.
People are always going to be part of the equation, both as potential weak points and as our best defense. Think about security training, educating people about phishing scams, social engineering, all that. That human firewall, it's essential.
Because even the smartest AI can't stop someone from clicking a bad link if they don't know any better.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Blevins really stresses that investing in people, in their training and awareness, it's just as important as investing in the latest tech.
It's about creating a culture of security where everyone understands why this is important and feels like they can actually make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And that goes beyond just individual users too. Blevins, he's big on collaboration, sharing information between companies, government agencies, even different countries.
So it's recognizing that no one can win this fight alone. Cybersecurity needs everyone working together.
Exactly. Even with all the challenges, all the threats constantly changing, Blevins, he's actually pretty optimistic about the future. He believes we do have the tools, the people, the know-how to make a safer, more secure digital world.
Yeah.
But it takes commitment to learning, innovating, and that collaboration we talked about.
So it's a call to action for all of us. Wow, what a way to wrap up this deep dive. We've covered so much, from the nuts and bolts of privilege control to the potential of AI and that whole idea of a collaborative, human-centric approach to security.
Yeah, it's been great. And hopefully everyone listening walks away feeling informed, but also, ready to do something, to be proactive about their own security.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Until next time on the deep dive, stay curious, stay vigilant, and stay secure.